We will be taking you shortly to the Prime Minister. Hopefully he doesn't rudely interrupt us, because I'm joined now by Greens Senator for South Australia, Robert Sims. Thanks very much for your company.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be with you.
Now, before we get into some of the issues in the mix domestically, I just want to get your reaction, if I can, to the massacre, there's no other word for it, in Orlando. Where do you sit on this with the responses about radical Islam, the responses about gun laws, and indeed also the targeting, I suppose, of the homosexual community, clearly in the way that this madman has gone about his business?
Well, Peter, this is a despicable hate crime, and it's a terrible reminder that homophobia and prejudice are still powerful forces in our world. You know, one of the really terrible dimensions of this hate crime is the fact that it's an attack on a gay bar, an area that for a lot of gay and lesbian and transgender people is considered a safe space. You know, I'm a gay man in my early 30s now, and I still don't feel safe to walk through the street holding the hand of a gay partner or to kiss them in public, and I know that's the experience of a lot of gay and lesbian people, but the one place where you do feel safe is in a gay bar, and to see that being targeted in this way is a really shocking thing, and I think that's why members of the LGBTI community here in Australia, in the United States and all around the world are feeling this very deeply.
I think what you've just said is something that really will resonate with members of the heterosexual community who might, like myself, be very much in favour of things like gay marriage, but not really appreciate until you hear it as directly as that, the difficulties that a gay couple would feel, showing affection because of prejudice that they might face, just, as you say, walking down the street. What do you make of this? Peter Madden, he's the Family First candidate, I believe, in Tasmania. He tweeted, "Though Orlando is abhorrent, it doesn't change the real and present dangers of the gay marriage agenda to Australian children." Your reaction to that?
Oh, look, I think that is an appalling comment. It's grossly insensitive, and really what a despicable thing to say following this tragedy. And might I say, that's actually a reminder of why we don't want to see a plebiscite on the issue of marriage equality, because whilst we have seen an outpouring of grief in our Australian community, we have also seen a bubbling up of homophobia. And what does really worry me about a plebiscite on the issue of marriage equality is that that would provide a forum for hate speech, and we don't want to see that being given more of an airing. But what completely inappropriate comments, and to be honest, it just demonstrates why the Family First political party are not fit for office in this country.
Yeah, it's not very good. I understand that he's apologised, but I think it was one of those putting it in context apologies, which is a bit of a non-apology, frankly. It's an interesting one, what you talk about, though, Senator, in relation to the marriage equality plebiscite. I mean, I'm a little torn on this. I've been against the plebiscite because I don't like plebiscites about rights. I also feel like, I think you've alluded to, like there's some issues attached to what, it could bring out the worst in society, and it did that in Ireland, even though the result was overwhelming. I guess the silver lining in the cloud, if I could put it that way, is that at least, in my view, it'll put the issue beyond doubt with a large majority of Australians coming out in favour of same-sex marriage, so that's at least something. But what about this? I want to get your reaction to Bill Shorten has suggested a plebiscite around local government amalgamations. Do you worry that that starts to make the idea of plebiscites just more accepted, not just on same-sex marriage, but more generally? It sort of blurs the line, I guess, is my point. If you're arguing against a plebiscite for same-sex marriage, but then you turn around and say, we'll have one for council amalgamations.
Look, I think one of the things about the plebiscite debate on marriage equality, and you mentioned Ireland before, they had to have a plebiscite or a referendum in that country because marriage was defined under their constitution. But that's not the case here in Australia. All we need is an act of parliament. And the only thing really stopping progress for marriage equality in this country at the moment is Malcolm Turnbull. And he needs to get out of the way and provide a free vote to members of parliament, because we don't want to see a hate campaign being levelled at the gay and lesbian community, because that just has such a terrible human impact. In terms of plebiscites and referendums on other issues, I think one of the problems we do start to see when we start outsourcing these decisions to the Parliament is that the Parliament is abrogating its responsibility to make decisions on these matters, and I think that can be concerning for members of the community.
Yeah, well, we are a parliamentary democracy. It's a representative democracy. We don't have an institutional citizen-initiated referenda like Switzerland, for example. So I take your point absolutely on that. Let's move to some local issues in South Australia. The Xenophon Party, which is in the mix. Now, my understanding is that the Greens, correct me if I'm wrong here, my understanding is that the Greens have directed preferences Labor's way in Labor-held seats in South Australia, but he's leaving it up to the individual contests whether to do the same in non-Labor-held seats. Is that right?
Yeah, we're running open ticket in the seats of Mayo, Barker and Grey, but it's my understanding that other seats we are preferencing the Labor Party ahead of the Liberals and the Nick Xenophon team.
Well, the interesting thing about that is in the seat of Sturt, for example, held by the manager of government business, Christopher Pyne, ironically, you might end up saving him because by sending preferences Labor's way, you may well get the Labor Party above the Xenophon candidate to ensure that he doesn't lose the seat.
I think that's a pretty long bow to draw, Peter. We're putting Christopher Pyne last in the seat of Sturt. And, you know, this is somebody who has been an architect of the deregulation agenda of universities, the architect of the $100,000 degrees. And so the Greens in the seat of Sturt are putting Chris Pyne last. So it would be a bit of a long bow to draw to say that somehow we're giving him a helping hand. But let me say that ultimately preferences are for the voters to decide, and they will determine where their preferences go. But in the seat of Sturt, we are making recommendations, and our recommendation is to put Chris Pyne last.
Green voters often do as they like, though, compared to the how to vote card. The other issue, of course, is how many how many booths are manned across the state. Being in the second position for the Greens in the Senate, you want to make sure that every booth is manned, won't you, Senator? Because it's going to be a tough fight for you in this double dissolution election to be able to get your seat back.
Oh, absolutely. Look, attending polling booths is a critical part of any election strategy. But let me say, actually, Peter, we're running a really strong grassroots campaign here in South Australia, and I've been really buoyed by the support that we're seeing right across the state. We've got members and supporters out there door knocking. They've knocked on thousands of doors, and there is a positive response to the Greens message. So I feel optimistic about the election, and I think we'll do very well. But make no mistake, as you say, I am in a difficult position. I do face a fight on my hands to hold my seat, and that's why I'm out there every day campaigning hard for every last vote right up until July 2.
Senator Sims, we appreciate you joining us on Newsday. Thanks very much for your company.
Thanks, Peter. Good to be with you.